just too bad. Like again, those are personal things that were.
He should have never done that. He should have never done that, what he did.
And it was compelling. He was compelled to do it because he didn't like chores. He'd never do it. If it was a chore, he'd have.
Krist Novoselic never tried to be the most famous one. He didn't write the hits, didn't chase the spotlight, and didn't radiate the same aura as Kurt Cobain. Nor did he become a new icon like Dave Grohl, but he is the only one left. When Kurt took his own life and Nirvana collapsed after just 3 blazing years, when everything fell apart, Krist quietly withdrew. No press conference, no solo stage, no dramatic "I'll be back" declaration. He vanished, and everyone assumed he had nothing left to say. But behind that silence lies a story yet to be fully told about a man who once slept on the floor next to Kurt, who witnessed every rise and fall of Nirvana, and who carried wounds no one could truly see. Why didn't he follow Dave Grohl to form Foo Fighters? Why did he choose politics over music? What really happened behind closed doors during those final fractured days of Nirvana? Krist was once seen as the shadow, but he may be the one who holds the key to corners of the past no one else has unlocked. And through how he lived, not what he said, he has written a quiet, enduring new chapter after one of the most tragic and unforgettable eras in 20th century rock. Krist Novoselic was born in Compton, California, a place not built for immigrant kids who spoke Croatian. His family came from the island of AZ, moving to America with hopes for a better life. They even changed their last name from Novoselic to Novoselic due to a typo during the passport process. But what couldn't be changed was the sense of dislocation Krist carried when they moved to Aberdeen, Washington, a gloomy town where the American dream often ran aground. Krist grew up with severe buck teeth and had to undergo corrective surgery. He was tall, awkward, Croatian-speaking, and struggled to fit in, always the odd one out at school. At 15, he was sent to live for a year with relatives in Zadar, Croatia. It was there, in a Balkan diner, that he first heard punk rock, the distorted guitars of the Sex Pistols, the raw screaming of Iggy Pop. It wasn't just music, it was a language for the voiceless. Krist found liberation. When he returned to America, he immersed himself in Led Zeppelin, Sabbath, The Who, and then gradually shifted toward DVO, the Ramones, and Dead Kennedys. But unlike the other kids dreaming of being lead singers or flashy guitarists, Krist chose bass, the least glamorous instrument, but the one that holds the band together, just like him. Someone who avoided noise, only wanting to keep his own rhythm steady. His first bass was a cheap one, but Krist didn't care. He practiced every note, learned how to anchor the sound, and realized this was how he would survive. Music didn't need to be understood. It just had to be enough to get through the days when no one asked if you were okay. And it was during those days that Krist met Kurt Cobain, a quiet kid with a faraway stare who played guitar like he was screaming into the void. When Kurt knocked on his door and handed him a cassette tape of Feel Matter, his old band, Krist didn't listen right away. It took a few months, during a strange lull, before he finally hit play. In that moment, he knew, I have to play music with this guy. That meeting between two wounded souls sparked the first flame of what would become Nirvana. In the early career of Nirvana, there was no record deal, no vow to change the world, just a cassette tape called Feel Matter and a long-haired kid named Kurt Cobain who shoved the tape into Krist's hand and said, "Give it a listen." It took Krist Novoselic months to actually listen to that tape, but when he did, he knew this was the music of the unheard, the voice of outsiders. It was raw and broken, but something about it rang painfully true. And in a dingy room in Aberdeen, Krist nodded, "All right, let's start a band." The early days of Nirvana had no spotlight. They were three nobodies, Cobain, Novoselic, and Aaron. Nirvana was born in the garages of Burkhard, jamming and sleeping in cars, surviving on instant noodles. When Aaron left, they cycled through other drummers, Dale Crover, Dan Peters, but no one stuck, not until Dave Grohl, a young drummer from the band Scream, arrived. That was when Nirvana truly took shape. Krist wasn't the center of it all. He stepped back, kept time, and laid the foundation. But that's exactly what made Nirvana different. While Cobain was the storm, raging and chaotic, and Grohl was the relentless engine, Krist was gravity, the one who kept the band from flying apart. When everything else began to explode, Krist was the steady pulse that kept the band grounded. Success for Nirvana didn't build slowly. It struck like lightning. Nevermind was released in 1991 with modest expectations, 50,000 copies. But within months they had to halt production of all other albums just to press more Nevermind, and the world would never be the same again. But for Nirvana, success was never comfortable. Krist once said, "We used to live on $15 a day, and then just months later, I could pay off my mom's debt, buy a used car, and stop sleeping on floors." But that feeling wasn't exactly joy, because when a punk band climbs to the top of the world, they don't just carry instruments, they carry their inner conflicts, their self-doubt, and the haunting question, "Am I still myself?" And that was only the beginning. Career success wasn't just Kurt Cobain or Dave Grohl. It was Krist Novoselic who played the very first notes of Smells Like Teen Spirit, the song that launched an entire era. Nevermind wasn't just a success. It was an explosion. From absolute obscurity, Nirvana shot straight to the top of the Billboard charts, dethroning Michael Jackson and turning anonymous rebels into cultural icons. Krist was never the one in the spotlight, but he was always present in those history-defining moments. He was the background pulse that powered a dream called grunge. From 1991 to 1994, Nirvana didn't just sell records. They rewrote the entire dictionary of 1990s rock. Nevermind sold 30 million copies worldwide. In Utero, released in 1993, hit #1 on the Billboard charts and sold over 3.5 million copies in the US, despite its raw, anti-commercial sound. Krist's legacy is undeniable. MTV Unplugged in New York, a legendary acoustic performance where Krist played upright bass, accordion, and even guitar, won a Grammy and became one of the greatest live albums of all time. And in every one of those moments, Krist was there. He co-wrote Polly with Kurt, a minimalist song that chills the spine. He played the airy, flowing acoustic bass on Come As You Are. He famously tossed his bass into the air during the 1992 MTV Awards, only to crash down onto the stage in front of millions. He pretended to pass out, but that moment became iconic. Krist never shouted. He didn't fight for the mic, but his bass lines, his tall, swaying figure on stage, gave Nirvana its steady pulse amid the chaos. When Cobain screamed and Grohl pounded the drums, Krist's bass was the invisible thread holding everything together. He may not have been Nirvana's soul, but he was its musical spine. Without him, it would have all collapsed. It was also Krist who helped guide Nirvana into uncharted spaces, from small Seattle stages to the Reading Festival, from benefit concerts to public stands for artistic freedom. He didn't just play music. He understood its weight. In 2014, when Nirvana was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Krist stood center stage. No Cobain, no defiant glare, just gratitude and the echo of a bass line stretching back through time. "We never set out to become legends," he said. "We just wanted to be heard and to live through our music." And they did, not just for a generation, but for an entire world. The cracks no one noticed. The day Kurt Cobain died, the headlines exploded, fans wept, and the rock world erupted in grief. Arguments and instant canonization of a man turned myth overnight followed. Krist Novoselic said nothing. No statement, no interviews, no defense of the band, no appearance at any of the loud memorials. He just disappeared. No one really knew where Krist was during those days. Some said he returned to live with family, others claimed he'd buried himself in the studio, and there were even rumors he had left music altogether. But one thing was certain, Krist was no longer the man he had been. Kurt wasn't just a bandmate. He was a friend, a brother, someone. Krist once said, "I always felt like I was trying to hold on to Kurt, even though I knew I couldn't." Kurt's death was a quiet collapse. It didn't explode like a tabloid headline, it corroded day by day. And Krist, the quietest one in Nirvana, was perhaps the one who carried that blow the deepest and the longest. It was also the first time he truly lost direction outside of music. In 1999, Krist divorced his wife, the woman who'd been with him since the days of sleeping in vans and playing dive bars. No scandal, no accusations, just nothing left to hold on to. The world saw him as the one who survived, but Krist knew a part of his soul had died on April 5, 1994. Then, in 2020, Krist's name suddenly resurfaced in the media, not for music but for politics. A Facebook post saying he thought President Trump spoke powerfully and clearly during the riots was twisted, shared hundreds of thousands of times, and turned him from an independent artist into a so-called fascist sympathizer. Krist had to step back again. He deleted Twitter, locked down Facebook, and left just one line behind: "I don't support fascism. I just believe in a society that listens." Beneath that calm exterior, not many people seem to see it. Krist is the kind of person who's always trying to keep the balance in a world where everything either soars or crashes. He chooses to stay still, not out of fear, but because he knows some things only shatter more when touched. And often, the ones who never speak of their pain are the ones who carry it the most. After Nirvana, people expected Krist Novoselic to launch a new supergroup, start a blockbuster project, or at the very least embark on an epic solo journey. But he chose none of those. Instead, he formed Sweet 75, a strange band with a sound both brooding and folksy, where he played bass while a Venezuelan singer took the lead. No one quite understood it, no one really remembered it, and Krist didn't care. To him, music wasn't about fame, it was the only way to keep going. In 2002, Krist returned with Eyes Adrift, joining Kurt Kirkwood of Meat Puppets and Bud Gaw of Sublime. For the first time, Krist sang lead on a few songs, as if testing himself, stepping out of the support role and into the light. But after just one album, the band dissolved. He had no regrets. Amid the occasional surprise appearance, playing with Foo Fighters, joining a tribute music video for Kurt, or performing with Paul McCartney on Cut Me Some Slack, Krist continued to lead an oddly simple life. He flew small planes, grew vegetables, DJ'd for a community station, and lived on a farm in Deep River. From 2017 to 2020, he played with Giants in the Trees, a quirky indie band. Their first song, Sasquatch, came with a music video Krist jokingly called a $2 million production, shot on an old phone. He sang backup, played accordion, wrote songs, and let everything unfold without worry. By 2022, Krist formed Third Secret with Kim Thayil of Soundgarden, Matt Cameron of Pearl Jam, and a few longtime friends. No press, no publicity, they quietly recorded. In a wood shop in Washington, Krist Novoselic and his bandmates released an album online, as if the whole grunge generation was having one last gathering without needing an audience. Krist never called it a comeback because he never left music. He just chose a path no one was watching, so he could hold on to the only thing that mattered, the truth. Politically, Krist was an artist who refused to stand on the sidelines in an industry where many artists choose silence to protect their market. He did the opposite. He stepped off the stage but not out of life. In 1992, when Washington state proposed a bill to label certain rock albums as pornographic, Krist, alongside Nirvana, publicly opposed it. They organized a protest concert, appeared on national TV to defend artistic freedom. It wasn't a PR stunt, it was a political statement from artists who meant what they played. From there, Krist gradually took a turn no one saw coming, diving into social and civic politics. He founded Jampack, a political action committee for musicians and artists fighting for youth rights in popular culture. He didn't speak from polished podiums but from community gatherings, rural fairs, and local radio stations. When electoral reform gained momentum, He joined the board of Fair Vote and became one of its most vocal advocates, pushing for ranked choice voting, proportional representation, and greater civic transparency. He wrote a book on grunge and government, penned op-eds, ran for office, and then stepped away because he never wanted to be a professional politician. He ran to prove one thing: politics isn't just for smooth talkers, it's for people who live their truth. In 2020, a Facebook post commenting on Trump's speech sparked a storm. The media ran with the headlines, and social media erupted. Krist deleted his accounts and then quietly said, "I don't support fascism. I don't belong to any party. I believe in dialogue." No further defense, no arguments. Like his music, he only spoke when it truly mattered. By 2023, he joined the Forward Party and co-founded the Cascade Party of Washington, a local, low-profile initiative with no races to win, no media to please, just a quiet attempt to restore the belief that an artist can still help change society by the way they choose to live. No one calls Krist Novoselic a genius. He didn't write Smells Like Teen Spirit or stand front and center with angel wings under the spotlight, but without him, Nirvana would have remained two broken halves. Kurt Cobain, all contradictions and torment, and Dave Grohl, young and ferocious, with no one in between to hold the pieces together. Krist was the baseline that kept Nirvana alive. No showboating, no fight for the spotlight, but every pluck of his strings in Come As You Are, Lithium, or Polly was a quiet heartbeat that gave grunge its soul. He was the only one who could stand between the light and the dark without being consumed by either. His legacy isn't in technical solos, but in the fact that he chose to stay when everyone else moved on. When Kurt died, Dave formed Foo Fighters, Pat smeared toward the world, but Krist stayed silent, vanished as if holding on to the memory the rest of the world was trying to bury. He never wrote a tell-all memoir or made a documentary to reveal the truth. He simply kept living, kept making music, and quietly upheld what Nirvana once stood for: honesty, no pretenses, and a refusal to bow to the market. In 2014, when Nirvana was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Krist took the stage with Dave and Pat, like three survivors of a storm that could never come again. He bowed his head, spoke little, but everyone knew no one was more worthy to accept that honor on Kurt's behalf. Then, in 2023, when receiving the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, he appeared once again with salt and pepper hair and that calm, steady gaze. He didn't dwell on the past because to Krist, the past isn't something to glorify. It's something to protect, like an ancient forest. No need for signs or monuments, just don't let it be cut down. Krist's legacy, quiet and steadfast, endures through his actions and his music, refusing to be erased or forgotten. Legacy doesn't live in statues. It lives in the quiet echo of artists who choose truth over fame, loyalty over attention, and the courage to keep living instead of trying to live forever in the spotlight. Among the thousands of bassists who've passed through the history of rock, Krist Novoselic stands as an exception. No technical showmanship, no attempt to become a symbol, no clinging to the spotlight, not even for a second. He did one thing and did it well. He kept the rhythm so others could be fully themselves. For Kurt Cobain, that meant listening without judgment. For Dave Grohl, it meant providing the silence needed to start over. For the audience, it was a quiet reminder that you don't have to scream to be remembered. Krist didn't stay in Nirvana for fame. He stayed for friendship. Just as later, he didn't keep making music for contracts, but because his heart still had something to say, even if it was through a country tune, a folk rock ballad in the woods, or the sound of an accordion on a nameless afternoon. And perhaps the most beautiful thing he left behind isn't a hit song, a speech, or a best-selling album, but a quiet, unshakable presence in a music world increasingly swept up in performance, profit, and spectacle. Nirvana, the name still shakes the world more than 3 decades later, but if you want to understand why it's still alive, you have to look at the man who quietly held his bass in the background, needing no glory, speaking only when it mattered. That man is Krist Novoselic, the last one still keeping time for the memory. If you believe that quiet souls like Krist deserve to be heard more, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow our channel for more untold stories still sleeping behind the curtains of rock history. Because sometimes, the ones who step back are the very ones who keep everything together.